Today, we're diving into the mysterious Dyatlov Pass incident in the northern Ural Mountains of Russia, where 9 hikers died under unexplained circumstances in 1959. 9 experienced hikers go into the mountains. None of them come back alive. Their tent is sliced open from the inside. Some are missing their eyes and tongues, and the weirdest part? They were all exposed to radiation. What happened on that mountain? This is the Dyatlov Pass incident, and it's been driving investigators and conspiracy theorists absolutely crazy since 1959. We're talking about one of the most bizarre unsolved mysteries in history, where the official explanations make zero sense and the unofficial ones sound like they're straight out of a horror movie. Today we're going through everything: the investigation, the evidence that doesn't add up, and all the theories that try to explain what actually killed these people, because trust me, this gets weird. So let me set the scene for you. It's January 1959 in Soviet Russia. A group of 9 hikers, all experienced, all students or graduates from Ural Polytechnic Institute, decide to go on a skiing expedition. And we're not talking about some random people who didn't know what they were doing. These were serious hikers. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was 23 years old and had tons of experience leading expeditions in harsh conditions. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women. They were planning to reach Otorten, a mountain in the northern Urals. The route they picked was classified as Category 3, which is basically the most difficult level available at that time. But for these guys, this was supposed to be just another challenging adventure. They started their journey on January 27th. The plan was simple: trek through the wilderness, reach the mountain, and come back by February 12th. One member, Yuri Yudin, had to turn back early because he got sick. That decision probably saved his life, and he spent the rest of his days trying to figure out what happened to his friends. Now, here's where things start getting strange. February 12th comes and goes. No one shows up. But at first, nobody panicked because delays were pretty common on these expeditions. Bad weather, difficult terrain. You know how it goes. But then days turn into more days, and families start getting worried. On February 20th, almost a week after they were supposed to return, search and rescue teams finally head out. And what they find? Well, that's where this whole thing turns into one of the most disturbing mysteries ever documented. The search team finds their tent on February 26th on the slopes of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl. And right away, something is very, very wrong. The tent is damaged, but not from the outside. It's been cut open from the inside, like someone took a knife and frantically slashed their way out in a panic. But here's the thing that makes no sense. All their belongings are still inside. Their shoes, their warm clothes, their supplies. Everything you would need to survive in the freezing cold is just sitting there in the tent. The temperature that night was around -25 to -30 degrees Celsius. That's like -13 to -22 Fahrenheit for my American viewers. You don't go outside in that without proper gear unless something absolutely terrifying is making you run. The search team follows footprints leading away from the tent. 8 or 9 sets of footprints, some barefoot, some in socks, some in a single shoe. They're all heading downhill toward the edge of a nearby forest, about 1.5 miles away. The footprints suggest the group was walking in an organized manner, not running in random directions. They weren't scattered or panicked based on the footprints alone. They were walking calmly, which makes the whole situation even more confusing. At the edge of the forest, under a large cedar tree, they find the first 2 bodies, Yuri Krivonyshenko and Yuri Doroshenko, both wearing almost no clothes, both dead from hypothermia. The cedar tree has broken branches up to about 5 meters high, like someone climbed it and was trying to look at something, or maybe hide from something. There are also remnants of a small fire, but it clearly wasn't enough to keep anyone warm. Then they find 3 more bodies between the cedar tree and the tent: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. These 3 seemed like they were trying to make their way back to the tent, but didn't make it. They also died from hypothermia. Slobodin had a small skull fracture. But doctors said it wasn't fatal and probably happened from a fall. So at this point, you've got 5 bodies, all dead from the cold, all found relatively quickly. The remaining 4? They don't find them until May, almost 2 months later, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine about 75 meters further into the forest from the cedar tree. And this is where things go from weird to absolutely disturbing. These 4 bodies, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, and Alexander Zolotaryov, had massive internal injuries. We're talking about major trauma. Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips. Zolotaryov was also missing his eyes. Thibault-Brignol had severe skull damage. Dubinina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures, like their ribs were completely crushed. The medical examiner said the force required to cause these injuries was equivalent to a car crash. But here's the weird part. There were no external wounds, no cuts, no bruises on the surface, just massive internal damage. The doctor literally said it was as if they'd been hit by a car, but there were no signs of an actual impact from the outside. Oh, and some of their clothes? They were radioactive. Not all of them, just certain pieces. The radiation levels were higher than normal background radiation, but not crazy high. Still, why would there be any radiation at all? The official investigation concluded in May 1959, and their explanation was basically this: an unknown compelling force. That's it. That's what they went with. The case was closed, all the files were sent to a secret archive, and the area was closed off to hikers and adventurers for the next 3 years. Let me just say that again. The Soviet government's official explanation for why 9 experienced hikers died in the most bizarre circumstances was an unknown compelling force. That's not an explanation. That's them saying, we have no idea what happened, and we're not going to talk about it anymore. Imagine being a family member of one of these victims, and the government tells you your loved one died because of an unknown compelling force. That would drive you absolutely insane, the lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, later said in the 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, that he was actually ordered to close the case. He claimed he wanted to keep investigating, but his superiors shut it down. He also mentioned that he personally believed something related to military testing or secret weapons was involved, but he was never allowed to pursue that angle. When a government tells you to stop investigating and locks away all the files, that usually means they either know something they don't want public, or they genuinely have no clue and don't want to admit it. The autopsy reports themselves raised more questions than answers. The doctors couldn't explain how someone could have such massive internal injuries without external trauma. One doctor compared the force needed to what you'd see in a high-speed car accident, but there was nothing on that mountain that could hit them with that kind of force. No falling rocks were found near the bodies. No evidence of an explosion. No signs of a fight with weapons, just bodies with crushed ribs and skulls, like they'd been squeezed by something impossibly strong. And then there's the fact that the investigation seemed rushed toward the end. After finding the first 5 bodies, it took them months to find the last 4, but once they did, the case was wrapped up within weeks. No extensive analysis of the radiation, no deep investigation into the military activity in the area, no explanation for the lights in the sky, just unknown compelling force, and case closed. So naturally, people started coming up with their own theories, and there are a lot of them. Some make sense, some are absolutely wild, but none of them explain everything that happened that night. Theory number 1, Avalanche. This is actually what some modern investigators believe. In 2019, a group of scientists published a study saying that a rare type of avalanche, a slab avalanche, could have hit the tent during the night. This would explain why they cut their way out in a panic and ran without proper clothing. The delayed avalanche could have caused the internal injuries to the 4 found in the ravine. But here's the problem with this theory. Experienced investigators at the time said there was no evidence of an avalanche. The tent was still standing, partially. The footprints leading away were still visible and organized. And avalanches don't explain the missing body parts, the radiation, or why they didn't try to go back to the tent once they realized they were freezing. Theory number 2. Military testing. Some people think the Soviet military was testing weapons in the area, maybe some kind of missile or bomb. There were reports of strange orange lights in the sky that night from other hikers in the area. The radiation could be explained by a radioactive weapon or accident. The massive internal injuries with no external wounds could be from a shockwave or pressure blast. This theory is interesting because the area was relatively close to some military installations, and the Soviet government was definitely doing secret testing during the Cold War. But if this was a military accident, why not just say that internally? Why keep it a mystery, even in classified documents? And it still doesn't explain the missing eyes and tongue theory number 3, infrasound. This is one of the more scientific theories. Infrasound is a low-frequency sound that humans can't really hear, but it can cause feelings of extreme panic, fear, and even physical symptoms like nausea and chest pressure. In certain conditions, wind passing over mountains can create infrasound waves. Maybe the hikers experienced this, panicked, cut their way out of the tent, and ran in fear. Once they realized what happened, hypothermia had already set in. This could explain the panic and the strange behavior, but again, it doesn't explain the physical injuries or the missing body parts. Unless maybe animals got to the bodies later, but the investigators at the time said the injuries happened before death, not after. Theory number 4, paradoxical undressing. This is an actual medical phenomenon where people who are dying from hypothermia start feeling hot and take off their clothes. This could explain why some of the hikers were found with almost no clothing. Combined with the avalanche theory, you could argue they panicked, ran from danger, got disoriented in the cold, and started undressing as hypothermia set in. But this still doesn't explain the massive internal injuries or why they cut the tent from the inside in the first place. If they had time to get dressed, they would have. The fact that they abandoned their gear suggests immediate and extreme danger. Theory 5. Fighting between the group. Maybe something happened that caused a fight. Maybe someone went crazy. Maybe there was an argument that turned violent. Some of the injuries could be from an attack by one of their own members, but this doesn't really hold up because the footprints showed they walked together calmly. There was no evidence of a struggle at the tent, and it doesn't explain why they would abandon all their survival gear. And then we get into the really wild theories. Some people think it was a Yeti or some kind of unknown creature. The local indigenous people, the Mansi, had legends about the area, and apparently the name Kholat Shakal means dead mountain in their language. But there's zero evidence of any creature, and the Mansi themselves didn't believe that's what happened. Others think it was aliens or UFO activity because of the lights in the sky and the radiation. There's even a theory about secret government experiments with paranormal phenomena, because this was the Soviet Union, and they were allegedly researching all kinds of strange stuff during the Cold War. The missing eyes and tongue have their own sub-theories. Some people think they were removed by the force that killed them. Others argue it was animals, specifically scavenging birds or rodents, that went for the soft tissue after death. The bodies were found months later, so decomposition and animal activity would be expected. But the medical examiner said the tongue appeared to be removed while the person was still alive, which is absolutely horrifying if true. So what actually happened on that mountain in 1959? Honestly, we might never know for sure. The most likely explanation, based on modern research, is probably some combination of natural phenomena. Maybe an avalanche, or a snowslide that didn't leave obvious traces, combined with panic, hypothermia, and paradoxical undressing. The internal injuries could be from falling into the ravine or being buried under heavy snow. The missing body parts could be from animals and decomposition over the 2 months before those bodies were found. But that doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the radiation, though some have suggested the hikers might have been exposed to radiation earlier through their work or through contaminated materials. It doesn't fully explain why they cut the tent from the inside, instead of just opening it. And it doesn't explain the lights in the sky that other witnesses reported. The Russian government actually reopened the investigation in 2019, and in 2020, they officially concluded it was an avalanche. But a lot of people aren't satisfied with that answer, including some of the original investigators and family members of the victims. What makes this case so fascinating is that almost every theory has some evidence supporting it, but also has major holes. It's like a puzzle where none of the pieces quite fit together. You can get close, but there's always something that doesn't make sense. The Dyatlov Pass incident has inspired books, movies, documentaries, and countless internet discussions. It's become one of those mysteries that people can't let go of, because the more you learn about it, the less sense it makes. 9 people went into the mountains, and something went so wrong that they chose to run into the freezing cold without proper clothing rather than stay in their tent. That decision makes sense if they were facing immediate death inside the tent, but we have no idea what that threat was. Was it natural? Was it human? Was it something else entirely? The evidence points in multiple directions, and maybe that's why this case has captured people's imagination for over 60 years. If this got you hooked, leave a like and subscribe. Check out the next video.